So you run into an old friend at a coffee shop. You start to catch up and reminisce on all those wild adventures and jaunts in grade school. And you start to ask each other the important questions. How many kids do you have these days? What do you do in your free time? Whatever happened to that old flame of yours? And then the conversation progresses and you start talking about deeper things. Like, what is CUI? You then explain to your friend that CUI is a lot like high school you. Often misrepresented, mislabeled, and misunderstood. But specifically controlled unclassified information, otherwise known as CUI, or CUI as the kids say these days, is an umbrella term that encompasses all cover defense information, CDI, and controlled technical information, CTI. These three markings are given to unclassified content that must be protected in a very specific manner, both within and outside a government information system. In general, CUI is information marked or identified in a government contract or provided to a government contractor by the DoD in connection with a contract. However, it can also be content that is developed by the contractor during the performance of a contract. This content is marked or identified by the DoD as requiring safeguarding or specific dissemination controls. And, well, you get long-winded and you continue, and you start to explain that certain regulations and laws are in place to protect CUI and other data types. So the National Archives and Records Administration, known as NARA, created certain definitions and standards for CUI. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, established certain cybersecurity requirements for systems containing CUI. And then here comes CMMC. CMMC comes along to further establish and enforce those requirements for DoD contractors. There's also a CUI registry that includes dozens of categories and roughly 100 subcategories of CUI. Real exciting stuff. You then tell your friend it essentially boils down to these 5 things. CUI Basic contains the baseline handling and dissemination controls as identified in the final rule issued by NARA. FISMA, or the Federal Information Systems Modernization Act, requires that CUI Basic be protected at the FISMA moderate level and can be marked as either CUI or controlled. That's CUI Basic. Then you have CUI Specified. CUI Specified is a subset of CUI where the authorizing law, policy, or regulation puts more restrictive controls on the handling and the control of CUI specified content. The underlying authority maintains the handling controls on CUI specified content, and only a designating agency may apply the limited dissemination controls to CUI content. Now, thirdly, organizations must have a system security plan, an SSP, and a plan of action milestone, otherwise known as a POAM. Fourth, companies must implement NIST 800-171 and likely CMMC Level 3 practices within the organization and on the information systems containing CUI. And then last but not least, they're going to need to complete a basic assessment and submit that assessment into the Supplier Performance Risk Assessment System, otherwise known as SPRS. And that, you tell your friend, is what CUI is. You share some final words and talk about how great it was to bump into each other, that you hope to see each other around, and then you finally part ways. Well, you finally part ways. Your friend then leaves with a deep understanding of CUI and an even deeper regret for asking you what CUI is.
Today's mega project is a bit of a cautionary tale on the striving for faster, quieter, or more deadly equipment, which was a hallmark of the Cold War between the USA and the Soviet Union. The USS 593 Thresher was developed as a direct follow-on and improvement of the Skipjack-class nuclear fast-attack submarines that the US had developed to help counter the growing fleet of Soviet diesel-electric and nuclear ballistic missile submarines that were becoming a very real threat to global security. The Thresher was to be the first real leap forward in many facets of fast-attack submarine technology. Initially, she was going to be just an improved version of the Skipjack-class submarine. The Skipjacks, in their own right, represented improvements that changed how submarines were built. They were the first to introduce the teardrop-shaped hulls, which provided a more hydrodynamically efficient shape, which resulted in higher underwater speeds and quieter movement through the water. However, they certainly were without their flaws. The first issue was their sail, not the big bit of white cloth that you see on old ships. The sail on a submarine is that blocky protrusion that sticks out at the top of it and contains the periscope and other stuff like that. Submarines experience drag, and this reduces efficiency and also makes noise, which is bad for a whole bunch of reasons. The idea of fast attack submarines is to detect their prey without being detected themselves. Second, subs have two types of sonar. Active, which is the one you hear go ping, and the passive one, which is essentially just very large and sensitive microphones that listen for the slightest sounds, allowing them to locate and track their targets. It's the latter of those two that are really hampered by the submarine's own noise, especially water moving over the aforementioned sail and the noisy forward torpedo room, all of which the sub's own passive sonar can detect, and it can mask the important noise, which is, of course, the enemy submarine. To address these, the Navy had to reduce the size of the sail. They also moved the forward torpedo room to the middle of the sub, which allowed for much longer range detection as it reduced the noise pollution that plagued the Skipjack class. Another improvement was mounting all the major machinery and pump installations on rafts suspended from the sides of the pressure hull. This eliminated their direct contact with the hull and nullified most vibrations from this equipment that made noise, further adding to the boat's stealth capabilities. She was also designed with an improved form of HY80 steel, which allowed her to dive nearly twice as deep as the Skipjack-class submarines, giving her an operational depth of about 400 meters or 1,300 feet over the older Skipjack class's 210 meters or 700 feet. Lastly, they introduced what they called seawater piping. This was intended to provide superior strength and reduce weight over traditional welding techniques. And remember this for later. It's a bit of foreshadowing. All these innovations, especially the reduced external drag, allowed her to be just as fast as the Skipjacks, despite having an additional 900 tons of displacement. These innovations meant that the boat was able to dive deeper than anything the Soviets could field. At the time, the Soviets had diesel-electric submarines, the Golf II class that could dive to 300 meters, and the nuclear Hotel class, which could also dive to 300 meters, 90 meters deeper than the Skipjack nuclear submarines. One of the issues early on in her development was the air pressure system for the ballast tanks, the tanks that control the buoyancy of the sub. This air system could produce pressure up to 4,500 psi, but the actual manifolds and piping were just off the shelf from earlier submarine classes and could only withstand 3,000 psi, so they added pressure reduction gear to address this issue. They did this to speed up production and reduce costs over having to develop a brand new system. Dockside testing found that these reducers would become clogged with foreign matter from construction, which couldn't be removed. But by adding some cone-shaped filters just before the reducers, this alleviated the problem, and the air systems functioned fine with dockside and shallow test diving, which is to a maximum 400 feet depth. With all of this development, she was essentially rushed into production, and corners were cut in order to just get this new killer sub out to sea as soon as possible. Many of her air ballast and seawater layouts used older pumps and designs of the previous Skipjack class and had far different layouts than previous classes, further adding to crew confusion and simulated emergencies. Consideration was not taken regarding the new, much deeper depths that the submarine would operate at, which was going to be a crucial factor in her subsequent loss, and there's a little bit more foreshadowing. Despite her revolutionary design, she was lost on April 10, 1963, approximately 220 miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in 8,400 feet of water. She went down while conducting a deep diving test with the loss of 129 crew and civilian shipyard contractors on board. The true details will never be fully known, but sound recording evidence, along with bits of communication from prior to her loss, point to a leak that started in the area of the engine room or reactor room. It's believed a failed joint or joints started to leak, and tons of seawater came in at extremely high pressure and caused a short, which resulted in the reactor to scram, which is a fancy way of saying shutting down. This removed her primary source of power and propulsion, leaving her unable to surface. So, the first inclination of trouble broadcast to the outside world was a message on the underwater telephone that had a minor problem, and honestly, any problem when you're that far underwater is not really a minor problem, and though they were passing 456 meters or 1,500 feet, so she was approximately 6,818 kilograms, that's 15,000 pounds heavier, due to a loss of buoyancy at that depth. She made several attempts to do an emergency blow, which is pumping high-pressure air into the sub's ballast tanks, forcing out all of the water and greatly increasing buoyancy. A post-wreck analysis on one of her sister ships found that among all the other factors of the loss, that due to the higher pressure, 4,500 psi, to lower 3,000 psi pressure difference, it would supercool the compressed air, which would condense into ice and essentially freeze and distort those cone-shaped filters, preventing the effective flow of compressed air to remove the water from the ballast tanks. This, combined with the loss of her primary driving force from the reactor and the ever-increasing weight of water flooding her rear section, kept forcing the submarine deeper. Then the Thresher, at approximately 2,250 feet, that's 900 feet deeper than her rated test depth, she imploded and was shredded to pieces over the ocean floor. After a long search for the wreckage and several boards of inquiry with over 1,700 pages of testimony and other documents, experts were able to reach the following conclusions. A contributing factor, in addition to the air system filter flaws, was the new joints that we talked about earlier. Even though they'd been ultrasonically tested and deemed safe when the sub was built, they were never tested again after she was put to sea for the first time in 1961. Post-analysis of other subs using this form of joining found that there was a much higher rate of failure than predicted, and the layout of seawater exposed piping was much more extensive than previous designs. Other non-design factors, i.e. human factors, were that she'd been assigned a new captain and executive officer who had no prior experience with this class of submarine. Furthermore, her normal complement of 13 officers was reduced to 12 as the chief reactor plant officer had to remain onshore due to medical issues. Additionally, 4 of the newly assigned junior officers had never been to sea before, let alone on a submarine about to conduct deep dive tests, and so they had no experience with the new layout of systems which were radically different from previous subs. In fact, the Thresher was so new that no shore-based simulators, something that all previous classes had been developed to address all of the Thresher's design changes and improvements. The bottom line when it comes to the loss of the Thresher was that it was a convergence of many factors relating to the design, its rush to production, procedural, administrative, and ultimately everyone involved underestimated the environment in which these subs were intended to operate. The loss directly led to the SubSafe program, which was instituted not only to correct design flaws and introduce strict manufacturing, construction quality control, but also to address procedural items to prevent this from ever happening again. In fact, SubSafe was recommended to NASA by the CAIB, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, as the program that NASA should emulate after that shuttle disaster. As for Thresher's sister subs, they were renamed the Permit class after the second sub constructed, and once all the design flaws were corrected, they eventually numbered 13 additional boats that served from the mid-60s until early 1990, when they were eclipsed by the follow-on Sturgeon and Los Angeles class fast attack submarines.
Every day, I look in the mirror and I am painfully reminded that a senseless act of workplace violence might have been prevented. We all deserve a safe work environment, but violence in the workplace is more frequent than you may know. Workplace violence is an act of physical violence which includes threats, harassment, or anything that causes you to fear for your personal safety. It can be inflicted by employees, supervisors, coworkers, family members, or even a stranger. Workplace violence is one of the leading causes of job-related deaths. While there is no sure way to predict human behavior, there are a number of ways to ensure a safe workplace, like recognizing potentially violent behavior and understanding your courses of action if you feel threatened. You have just as much responsibility as supervisors and senior leaders to ensure a safe working environment. The best prevention is identifying and addressing possible problems early. My name is Captain Katie Blanchard, and I am an Army nurse. My story began when I became a supervisor to a civil service employee who showed many signs of potential violence: deteriorating job performance, poor relationships with coworkers and customers, refusing to accept criticism of his performance, refusing to comply with rules, outbursts of rage, swearing, odd behavior that caused people to avoid him, refused to work with him, and in fact, his workspace was isolated, so he didn't work around anyone else. When he communicated to others, he avoided eye contact. He frequently seemed angry and irritated. The first time he reacted violently toward me, I was counseling him about his lack of performance. Alone with him in his office, he became enraged and shouted at me. I left and reported the incident to my supervisor. When my supervisor confronted him, he denied everything. I pursued disciplinary action, but it took months for the paperwork process. Meanwhile, I continued to try to hold him accountable for his work performance. For my own safety, I always had someone else in the room during counseling. I was genuinely afraid of him, and everyone knew it. This individual intimidated and harassed me. At one point, he repeated several times, "You are the problem," and refused to leave my office when directed. My workplace became an environment where verbal abuse and disrespectful behavior were tolerated. 2 weeks before the fateful day, my life would change forever. My attacker's whole demeanor abruptly switched. He became upbeat, smiling, jovial, behavior totally out of character. The sudden change of behavior was another typical warning sign of workplace violence. On September 7th, the workday was drawing to a close, and the hallways had grown quiet. Most everyone had left for the day, but I noticed my attacker lingered longer than usual at work. A coworker accompanied me when I told him he needed to leave. He agreed, and I went back to my office. I texted my husband I would be leaving the office shortly. Suddenly, my attacker appeared in the doorway, and without a word, approached my desk and emptied the contents of a bottle on me. Everything happened so quickly. I could smell the toxic scent of benzene all around me as he lit a match. I owe my life to 3 people who still happened to be at work that day: Deanne Killian, Adele Ganesius, and Sergeant First Class Dolan reacted with incredible heroism. Without thought for their own safety, they put out the fire on my body, prevented my attacker from fatally stabbing me with scissors he slashed across my face and throat, and finally managed to subdue him. I was in a coma for some time, and I awakened to learn I had sustained 3rd and 4th degree burns to 20% of my body. My family, including my husband, 3 small children, my parents, and siblings, are an amazing support system for me as I continue to recover from multiple surgeries and painful rehabilitation. They say hindsight is 20/20, but in this situation, all the clues were glaringly there. I attribute that to general lack of knowledge about what behaviors we need to be watching for and how to appropriately respond to workplace violence situations. Make sure there is a comprehensive workplace violence prevention program in your organization and effective security measures are in place. Supervisors and managers are responsible for coordinating with human resources, security, employee assistance programs, and the Office of General Counsel to deal immediately with threatening or potentially violent situations that occur. While I live with the constant reminder of the tragedy of workplace violence, I cannot turn back the hands of time. I can only hope that my story will serve to create a healthier, more productive workplace environment and spare others the physical and emotional pain.
I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, or sit bolt upright, be tense, and hate it. The choice is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, Operation Security.
You've heard people mention the 5-part OPSEC process, right? But if you're like most people, it probably just sounds like a long laundry list. Part 1, identify critical information. Part 2, analyze the threat. Part 3, analyze the vulnerabilities. Part 4, assess risk. And Part 5, apply countermeasures. You may not think that the critical information list means anything to you, but you need to, because practicing OPSEC every day is one of the most important things you do. And if you don't, you're not only risking yourself and your own information, but putting your family, your friends, your coworkers, and your whole country in danger. You never know who you could be protecting.
A grave danger threatens mission security. It puts American lives in imminent danger. It can defeat the most technologically advanced security in the world. The Pentagon has warned us. The past has taught us. But only you can save us from the greatest threat to our nation: employee carelessness.
Hello there! I know sometimes you want to say something so much you feel you should shout it from the mountaintops. Or if you don't like to shout, you post information on the internet. Things such as troop movements, training procedures, and security vulnerabilities. And once you do that, you might as well be telling the whole world.
Hey, Jebediah!
Hey, Frank!
You talking about OPSEC?
Sure am, Frank!
That's great, Jebediah!
I know!
You tell them that posting sensitive information on social networking sites is like shouting your intentions to the whole world, including the enemy?
Sure did!
Oh! Anything else to tell them?
Yeah! Practice OPSEC and leave the shouting to us!
Hello there, ladies. I can see you wanting to swoon, but wait. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a pharmaceutical distributor of sorts, you see. I provide the people with what they desire. I enjoy salsa dancing and high-stakes midnight deliveries. Both of them require a bit of la pasión. I'm a businessman at heart, and I try to keep the local economies afloat. I have many friends in the community who I can rely on to provide me with information. But much of my intel comes from people like you, my dear friend, American military members who post details on the social networking sites, upload photos, update their statuses with critical information, geotag their locations. or people who don't shred their documents. I ask the questions. Yeah? Is that clear? What part of that phrase you don't understand? For the good of my customers, of course. Because really, I'm a humanitarian at heart.
Okay, let's see what we made out with. Operations plans and a Facebook page with unit locations shared. R&D information and a conference attendee list from an unsecured network. And lonely key personnel with top security clearance and loose lips. Oh, okay. Here's your toy.
You wouldn't give away critical information this carelessly, would you?
OPSEC again. I'm going back.
Stop it!
Hi, my name's Christine, and I'm looking for someone I can spend the rest of my life with. Or at least someone who will believe me when I tell them that. A little bit about me. I'm an actress of sorts. I can manage myself in any situation, whether it be pretending to be an employee in a lab, a hotel maid, a custodian, a singer, salsa dancer, a librarian, or an interested girl in a bar as soldiers blab and blab about their jobs. I'm self-employed, making my way by selling secrets I found while searching a hotel room or pretending to be someone's girlfriend for a while. It's amazing how far a little charm can get you. Oh, that's so interesting. Don't be silly. I love hearing you talk about your job. I would never tell anybody. The perfect mate would enjoy candlelit dinners, antiquing, espionage, and spilling secrets to his or her girlfriend. I'm recently single and a fugitive from the various agencies and commands that are trying to find me. But they won't. And I am an equal opportunity dater. I don't care if you're cross-eyed, how many pimples you have, or how seldom you practice personal hygiene. Oh no, those glasses look great on you. The thicker the better. So, if you think you can handle a talented actress with no morals and a habit for looking over your shoulder, well, you can start by buying me a drink. I've been waiting for you.
You think this little stud muffin here is actually chatting with me? My user's gaining access to all points of contact and proprietary intellectual property. Mommy wouldn't be very happy to know that Stud Muffin here just downloaded a corrupt file like me to her work computer. He'll never even know the potential danger that he put Mommy in. Oh, and I won't be showing up for our hot date.
Hi. My name is Hakim, and I'm looking for someone special. I'm a Scorpio. I love to shop at the black market. I like reading philosophy by firelight and constructing my own IEDs. I'm sorry, I'm on the phone right now. No, shut up. You listen to me. My hobbies include painting, football, searching Facebook to check for U.S. military member status updates. I like to tweet and check MySpace to find out which military member has a family that I would enjoy threatening. And I know that somewhere out there is somebody special for me. Someone to unwittingly give me the information I need.
In a world where secrecy saves lives, a menace rears its ugly head. It renders our most powerful technologies useless. Our most sensitive information is ripe for the picking. Thanks to unencrypted email. No one knows where that email will end up. Join the resistance.
Oh, hi there, Angela. Griffin here.
coming to you from my command bunker.
It's a basement!
Command bunker, Mom! Okay, right. Updates. You are gonna love this. I got into the DMB's database, 2 corporate systems, and a high school. And it was no problem, really. But anyway, now I'm working on getting into your military account over at Southern Command. Pretty soon, I'll be able to send you encrypted poems to read while you're at work. So I spent a few days last week at a coffee shop getting my Choco Cafe slurp on and was able to snap pictures of quite a few US Southcom security badges. People are constantly wearing those things outside of the gates. So I thought, why not make one of my own, right? I can add it to my collection. From there, I can sneak onto the base and say hello to you in person. And then you'll be my girlfriend for real. Even if you don't know it yet.
You don't have a girlfriend.
I do have a girlfriend. A real one. So I saw you at the coffee shop. And I noticed that you are constantly playing on your smartphone, checking in online, looking at your work emails. Oh, you temptress. So, I found you on Facebook and Twitter and Blogster and some other photo sites. The embedded geotagging on the photos gives me the GPS location of your home and your office. I mean, I bet you didn't think of that when you were snapping those pics, huh? Really, I'm not that clever. Okay, it was pretty clever. I love how you don't use any of the privacy features on your accounts, letting me see everything. Until we finally meet, you will find me in Battle World. Tonight after 11. I'll be seeing you soon, Angela.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I'd like to travel around to exciting, exotic places and listen in on all your conversations so I can use that information to make problems disappear. So last week, I was actually over at the airport tracking on my latest target. He's one of those guys that for some reason never remembers to take off his security badge. Like, ever. But, as is very typical of me at airports, my flight gets delayed. So while I'm sitting there waiting on my flight, this lady comes and she sits down next to me. And she's got this huge just bag and just like plops it down and then slides open her laptop and flips out the cell phone. And as soon as I see that, I'm like, do not start talking on that cell phone. Do not! But of course she does. And she talks and talks and talks. And she's all like,
so I'm on my way to Brazil. I know, Brazil, right? And I wonder what the cuisine's gonna be like and the culture.
And I'm like, I wonder when you're gonna shut up. You know. But I keep my cool. Because right around this point, she starts to talk about her job. Turns out, she's a government contractor working on some kind of new airline project for the military. And she's actually working on the presentation for it right on her laptop. Needless to say, my appetite is whetted. It seems that she's promoting some new jet for the military at the Brazilian Air Show. Now, she is excited about it, but also very nervous because of having to leave her teenagers home all alone.
So we just hate Nancy's new boyfriend. I mean, just hate him. And Chris, well,
he needs to study for his exams, but my husband's still off on deployment.
I don't know what we're gonna do there. And I just feel so bad because this is like the first time the kids have been at home all alone for so long by themselves.
I snagged a few papers off of her, like just the conference schedule and travel itinerary. Seems she actually scheduled herself for a trip for Rio de Janeiro. Ooh, how nice. But now, I'm gonna make a huge fat paycheck by telling somebody else about all the cool stuff I'm learning.
Rio sounds nice to me.
These days, it's easy to get information. Social networking sites, smartphones, online searches, unsecured Wi-Fi hotspots, and yes, even printed resources make it possible for someone to find just about anything. Information such as troop movements, research data, and mission details are laughably easy to find if you know where to look. But who would actually be looking for all this information? There's the obvious list of nefarious characters, of course. Identity thieves, sexual predators, and your commonplace criminals. But when it comes to mission-critical information, even unclassified information, the list grows tenfold. Now you're not just worried about pickpockets, but hackers, nation-states, foreign spies, domestic anarchists, and of course terrorists. And just because you don't think the information is useful, doesn't mean someone else isn't looking for it.